Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Particularly when you are the carer, it can be really difficult, especially with our aged parents, because they're both aged and the carer is struggling to look after themselves, let alone a loved one as well.
Watching a loved one's health and confidence decline due to old age is a challenging process. Your parents were once your role models and mentors, and you depended upon them. What do you do when those roles are reversed and they need your help? Today's guest is Jenny Block, General Manager of Chaplaincy and Spiritual Care at BaptistCare. We're going to discuss some of the keys of caring for elderly parents and the importance of looking after yourself, your marriage and your family during this season. That's Jenny Block, along with my wife Kate and myself Brett Ryan, for Focus on the Family, Australia. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
This is such an important topic because many of our listeners are right there right now. They're looking after elderly parents, or they're going to be looking after elderly parents. And in our first part, we were talking about the many different aspects of looking after the finances, safety, nutrition, medical support, making sure their will is up to date, power of attorney, medical power of attorney. But I think it's really important, and we just landed a little bit about a funeral and that my mother had organised her funeral. We're so grateful for that. But I think it's really important to record their story before they lose their faculties and to hear about their history. And we see a lot more people looking at ancestry and we don't have those conversations. We don't have that heritage. So what could we do?
It's so important to be able to grasp some of those stories and get them written down or get them, recorded.
Yeah.
However way, we don't have the old cassette tapes now anymore, do we? But, there are clever ways to do it.
Oh, there are. There are amazing apps where you can record it and they will actually transcribe it for you.
Oh, there you go. I know, it's very clever. Even though the families may not be that interested, you don't know, do you?
No.
Down the track, you may have a grandchild that will be desperately wanting to know about the grandmother and will want to read or listen to it. But what's more important is actually doing it for our elderly parents because what it does is it's being curious and hearing their stories.
Their lives matter.
It does. It does. And it can be phenomenal, the things that you do hear. I know when my mum died, it was like, oh my gosh, all those stories that I didn't get from her. I thought that I had longer and I didn't take the time to stop and ask her things. And then, of course, she was then diagnosed with dementia and it, very quickly. She wasn't able to speak. So there is definitely grief when you miss out on hearing those stories.
Yeah.
But let's stop, pause, hear these stories, write them down, put them aside, make them into a beautiful little book. We can do that now, can't we?
Yeah.
There's so many ways. And how honouring. This is all about honouring, respecting, being curious, being present to our beautiful people.
It's interesting as children of elderly parents, when they start telling a story, you go, I've heard that story. But often you have missed what went on behind.
Yes.
Or you grew up in that family, you go, I know that story, but you don't know actually what happened, what went on behind the scenes or how you prayed about this and how, the outcome of that was actually a huge answer to prayer that you've prayed about for 3 years or 10. And so to hear that part of the story now that you're older is just a huge privilege. And that happened with me the other day, actually sitting and talking to my mum. And I said, I never heard that. And I feel so privileged that I get to sit and hear. I have a praying mother who prays for all her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. And so just to sit and listen to how God moves her. And I've watched her be a rock throughout my life with God, even through major crisis.
The Bible we mentioned last time talks about honouring your mother and father and how we go about that. And sometimes in our multi-generational world that we live in and social or financial circumstances have required some parents to move into the family home.
Yes.
And that can be fraught with landmines, I'm sure.
Yes, very much so. I'm seeing this happen with my sister, actually. Yes, she's having her daughter and son-in-law and 2 grandchildren move in with her. So once again, it's communication.
Yeah.
Having the
Establish some
conversation.
guidelines.
Yeah. Boundaries are the word as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Having
It's
regular.
too loud.
Yes.
It's too cold.
Yeah, but regular conversations of what's working, what's not working, and deciding to do it
Yeah.
and having a good why. Why
Yes.
are we doing this?
Yes.
And I think we've got to make sure that it's not just for the financial reasons. There's got to be a bigger picture.
And it's a big ask for everyone to involve.
It is.
I think too, though, that if you're making the decision to do it, then you've just got to get on board. Because if you go in with resentment that they are now in your home, what's the point?
Well, it's not
There
gonna
isn't.
last.
It's going to cause so much damage relationship-wise. But if you say, you sit down, you talk about why, you talk about whatever it is that you need to talk about in relation to your family situation, and then saying, are we both on board? What's it going to look like? These are the boundaries we need to set in place before we even start. And then if things go skew-whiff, which invariably they will, because we're all people, then to say, let's go back to the boundaries we kind of set in the first place.
At the beginning.
We seem to have gone off kilter. And do that respectfully. You can literally go back like you do with boundaries with children. Okay, these were the boundaries, these were the consequences, etc. And so the same goes with anybody who's in your home.
Very much.
Okay, we need to respect each other's privacy. We need to respect each other's whatever it is, and then talk about it.
I think we also need to not only discuss the difficulties, but also celebrate the wonderful things that happen and acknowledge when we've had a wonderful time. This dinner has been wonderful. We've all been together. And I don't think we do that very well.
Yeah,
No.
that's very much so. I'd like to talk more about how the ripple effect on the family takes place later on. But what happens when you've already talked about safety and sometimes it becomes unsafe and they have to go into a nursing home or some sort of aged care facility and you just got a reluctant participant.
Yes.
I don't want to go. And I know of someone just recently, husband had been looking after his wife with dementia. She had some health issues just recently and has just went in for respite care, but didn't realize how much he was suffering for looking after her and has remained. And she's staying there. And now she's nasty towards him. How do we have those conversations when it's really difficult, uncomfortable, but it's for everyone's mental health and physical well-being?
Because he's not sleeping.
Particularly when you are the carer, it can be really difficult, especially with our aged parents because they're both aged and the carer is struggling to look after themselves, let alone a loved one as well. And this happens so often that people do finally come in for respite and they never go home. Or we've had people nearly dropped on the doorstep and not even told that they're staying.
Goodness.
Oh, wow.
So that creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of resentment. They feel rejected or they have gone into hospital and the family have said, well, they can't go home because they can't care for themselves anymore. So they literally go from the hospital to residential care. It's fully understandable, but therefore this person has then got no choice what is being packed into their bags to be brought in.
Yeah.
So these types of things happen. So once again, it's trying to have the conversation with mum, with dad, this is what's happening. But sometimes they are just so angry that the families feel like they've got no choice but to nearly drop them at the doorstep.
Yes.
And get in the car and leave them. And therefore, aged care, the workers there understand that this is hard.
On both sides.
Yeah, lots of love is put into it. It was really interesting. There was one lady that she came in straight from hospital. She was very angry that her family had done this to her. In my conversation as a chaplain, she would just all of a sudden think of a book and she'd go, what happened to that book? Or she would think of her favourite cup and go, what happened to that cup? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And so we did just the journey with her. And it probably was about 12 months into her being into the home. She ended up with a new lady living next door to her. She was angry. She was unhappy with her family. So I went to the neighbour who had been the one that had been unhappy, and I went in and I told her and I said, look, can you just keep an eye on your neighbour? She's really unhappy. And I'm thinking that she had been through it as well, so she would understand it.
Yeah.
So, can you keep an eye on her, go and love on her, go and have a cup of tea with her,
Gave
things
her
like
purpose.
that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, of course, Jenny, I'll look after her. And then she looked at me and she said, oh, thank goodness I wasn't like that when I came in. I loved it when I came in. And, it really surprised me that she had forgotten. But I thought we have actually done our job.
Yes.
Because we had made her feel
so good.
like she was home.
She's let go of.
She'd let go of it.
Yeah.
And so, I just want to call out to everybody in aged care, homes that are working. They just do an amazing job. They work hard. 99% of them absolutely love their residents.
Yeah.
They're
It's amazing.
We've spoken about honouring your father and your mother, but sometimes they have to put them into aged care for their own safety and their own well-being, for themselves as well as for their parent. Do they feel like a sense of failure or let them down?
Of course they do. And even with the language of we have to put them, like we're placing them, we're giving them a new home where they're going to be safe. So we have to be careful with our language and the way that we see it. But yes, there definitely is a lot of guilt. Have I done the right thing by mum, by dad?
I think also, I know what it was like when my mum moved into, she's in a independent 2-bedroom, apartment. But at the same time, I went, this is an acknowledgement that this is her last season.
Yeah.
And that was really hard.
Yeah.
To stop and go, this is the end. She won't be moving anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so acknowledging and enjoying every moment.
Yeah, very much.
That you don't know what the days hold.
You're listening to Focus on the Family Australia, and we're talking to Jenny Block, the General Manager of Chaplaincy and Spiritual Care of BaptistCare. And we're talking about caring for elderly parents.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
Welcome back, and we're talking with Jenny Block, General Manager of Chaplaincy and Spiritual Care at BaptistCare, and you're listening to Focus on the Family Australia. Now, we've spoken about caring for the elderly, and it can be all-consuming.
Yes.
And there's so many different variables and how to have those conversations, the needed conversations.
Yes.
But it takes its toll on the individual. You've had to experience this.
I have.
And you spoke before our conversation, you're saying that your sister had to look after your mother because you were working full time. So it's important to have a little bit of self-care, self-awareness, and how we can support one another, and how do we care for our marriage, and how do we care for our families. So where do we start?
Communication. We need to talk. We so need to do that. I know for my sister, I was so grateful that she actually came and spoke to the family, spoke to all of us. So I'm one of 5 children. The boys don't live in Sydney, so it fell on the girls, the 3 of us, to look after mum and dad. And then it was my sister that came and spoke to us and said, look, I'm willing to look after mum and dad. And so therefore, I would take my sister out for coffee, to be able to spend time with her, give her lots of thanks, and acknowledge what she was doing.
Yeah,
and
it's a sacrifice.
It was a sacrifice that she did.
Did she have people coming in during the day to say help wash,
Mum and dad had actually been put in using that word. had been put into a residential home, but she was the one that was visiting them,
Okay.
going and picking up the washing,
Yes.
taking them to their medical appointments,
Okay.
all that, and looking after the finances. So she did an awful lot of work. So I was
Yes.
very grateful for her.
Yeah.
But it did take its toll. So we need to, if you are a carer, you have to acknowledge whether mum and dad are living with you or they're in their own home and you're visiting them or in a home, you have to look after yourself and
Yeah.
acknowledge that there's a lot in it, not only physically, but emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah, very much so. So you need to be intentional.
You do,
And a little bit of me time is not being selfish. You're actually going to be a better you
very much so.
to be all your various roles. I know that for men, they could be more compartmentalized and say, this is what I'm doing. But a woman, and again, this is a huge generalization, are going to feel it a lot more, the emotional side of things. And it's all very well to say you need to look after yourself, but they've got more to do.
Yes.
And they don't want to let anyone down. And
Yeah.
But it's actually doing them a disservice by trying to do it all together.
Very much so. And that's when you do need to get some help to come in. So
So recruiting others.
very much so, there are lots of organisations that can come in and even sit with mum and dad for a time so that you can go and have coffee, go out, do what you need to do, just go get the nails done, whatever it is. So you can have that precious time out and not to feel guilty, to know that this is necessary. So then you can go home and be present
Yeah.
to your parents or be able to pick up the phone, talk to them, whatever however you are caring for your parents.
And I do know that having experienced this, my mum looked after my dad for 5 years with cancer. So even palliatively, not right to the end, because we said she needs to be able to sit as a wife, not a carer.
Yes.
So we put him in palliative care, the last few weeks.
Yes.
But nearly the whole time. And there are a lot of people that can come into the home. There were people who did music therapy. There were people who came in and gave massages to the carer, or
There's a lot of great services.
a lot of
available.
great
There
services
is.
that we can access for a carer, whether they're the spouse or whether they are a family member. And just to be aware to ask for that.
And that's what I was going to say. To navigate what's out there can be very difficult. Aged care is a very difficult
Complicated.
space.
It is.
Complicated
System.
space to navigate. So please reach out for help. Pick up the phone. Talk to your GP. They may be able to help you.
Getting aged
Of
care
where-
assessments
Yes.
coming in.
So ring up aged care organisations as well. They may be able to direct you with where to go. Even websites can be so difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
So, get the help that you need.
And even Centrelink.
They can.
Centrelink is a complicated organisation, and anyone who's dealt with, because it's such a big,
Yes.
wide, broad,
Very much.
place. I was talking to a financial advisor with my mother-in-law, and he was talking about if she needs Centrelink.
Yes.
I started to glaze over because I'm like, oh dear, the navigation of that.
Yeah.
And he said, we can do that for you. And I
wonderful.
went, oh my goodness. So she needs to go into higher care.
Yes, that's right.
Then he will organise Centrelink. And I went, oh, what a great option. Now, a lot of us didn't know that. I did not know that. And I handle a lot of areas of finance, but I did not know that a financial advisor can do
that work for you.
Yes.
Yeah. There's so much there. I mean, obviously we're talking about self-care. We need to learn to try and find ways to relax, to recharge. You need to put some boundaries in place. Creating some me time sounds very easy, but we need to do it for our own health and well-being.
It's not selfish.
It's not being selfish.
It's not self-compassion.
Getting good, adequate rest, nutrition, putting your hand up.
Yes.
All of these things are really, really important. But then I'd just like to, just for a few moments, just talk about faith.
Yes.
And we've talked about, the Bible talks about honouring your mother and father. We've spoken about that. But he also is in there with you.
Yes. Yeah.
And with them.
And so we need to lean a lot more into that space, don't we?
We do. I was reading a Bible passage this morning, how the God of compassion comforts us. And in this difficult situation. I know when I went into chaplaincy, it was really hard, and I was saying, God, why am I doing this? And he gave me the passage in Isaiah about comfort my people.
Mm.
And then when I then found that passage, that God of compassion that comforts us. And so therefore to be able to lean on God in these difficult times.
I love the scripture too where it says, the God who comforts us gives us the comfort for us to give to others.
That's right. And can I also say that caring for our parents, at times it's difficult, but
it's a privilege.
It's a privilege, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And it can be such a joy.
Yeah.
Mm. Oh,
And
yeah.
my mother always, she said, I don't want to be a burden. And I said, you're not a burden.
No.
Yes, I'm constantly saying that to her
she
too.
said, I don't want you to ever feel like you're a burden. And that's part of my role as a son.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, with the pace of what we have to do, it's always funny when she says, now, she always rings me when I'm actually speaking. I can feel my phone vibrate. She goes, I knew you were speaking, but, and I said, it's okay, Mum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, it's all very well for people who have got a good, healthy relationship
Yes.
with their parents
Yes.
and can have these brave
Yes.
and courageous and needed conversations. But what would you say for those who it's contentious? They know they need to do a little bit and they want to do it, but the relationship is
There's
fractured.
a history. Yeah.
And so how do we do that?
How do we do it? Well, I would encourage people, see if there's a chaplain to help
Yeah.
navigate it. You can actually go and find a counsellor to talk it through, just to be able to see if you can be able to move through the difficulties
Yeah.
so that then you are able to be with your loved ones because they're not going to be here for much longer.
No.
Maybe it's been too difficult to even do that.
Yeah.
And to say, okay, that's okay. Because some people have had a very difficult life with their parents.
They have.
Yeah.
You know, we have to acknowledge that it has been really hard.
So we have
And
the
they
power of
have-
forgiveness, process the forgiveness, because sometimes it may not necessarily mean reconciliation
No, it may
of the
not.
relationship.
It may not.
But you've got to do everything you can to try and restore. But if
Yep.
it's not possible, to live in that space.
No, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And to be compassionate to yourself and to stay safe for yourself as well, your own emotional well-being as well, and do what you can do.
The final question I'd like to ask is people who are either entering this phase or they're right in it right now, what would you like to say to them?
I would like to say that God is in the midst of this journey that you are on, that He has promised to be with us to the very end. He never leaves us. He never forsakes us. He gives us wisdom. He gives us patience. He gives us the compassion that we need. But we can only grasp those things if we pause and we put our face to Jesus and ask Him to do this journey with us.
Beautiful.
And to care for us, ourselves in the midst of it as well.
It's so very good. Jenny, we thank you so much for sharing your own personal story,
Thank you.
but also in your expertise and your experience. This has been very helpful, not only for us who are doing this right now, but also for many of our listeners who are feeling this potential stress that's upon them. They might be living it right now, but there is great resources, and we at Focus on the Family have a number of resources on how to navigate that. But you can also contact your local aged care facility, and councils are a lot better in this area.
Yes.
But also turn to your local church community to be able to help guide there. And they'll be there. We have to be, courageous enough and humble enough to put up our hands and say,
Very much so.
I need a little bit of help. Thank you so much for being with us once again, Jenny.
Thank you. It's been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a number of resources on caring for your marriage, your family, and yourself while caring for an elderly parent, and how to honour our parents on our website at families.org.au. And thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Kate and the rest of the team, I'm Brett Ryan and would like to invite you to another edition of Focus on the Family Australia.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.